And welcome to Locked on Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. A brutal Monday for the Lakers. Dan Hurley turns them down. Where are the Lakers going to find their next head coach? That's the question next.
You are Locked on Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked on Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers to the channel, all of whom, Andy, are wondering just where the Lakers go from here on what was a very busy Monday. We were promised, Andy, it was going to be a big Monday, and we got it. But the news, not what the Lakers want. It broke around 9, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that.
10 or 11 o'clock Pacific, 10 or 11 a.m. Pacific time. And, we did an emergency podcast. We went through some of our immediate train of thought reactions to this, just stream of consciousness. And I got to tell you,
by the way, that Dan Hurley said no. We actually gotten that to that part of the news. 6 years, $70 million. The initial report from Woj, confirmed by Dan Wakey at the LA Times. That was the offer the Lakers made to Hurley. Certainly, it would have put him up in the upper echelon of NBA coaches in the top 6, but certainly not at the top or that, and not wildly beyond what he's making at UConn. So lots of things to unpack regarding that as well.
Yeah, we gave our immediate thoughts earlier during the day on Monday, and it's funny how having several hours to reflect on all of it, it doesn't grow any less confusing or questions arising. It doesn't grow any more reassuring. It raises just more questions about exactly how the Lakers got here in the first place, because there had been so much reported momentum towards JJ Redick from multiple reporters from very different outlets, to the point where Redick felt so, to use the Shams Charania parlance, zeroed in on, that it led us to question, okay, like, what exactly was the process behind the scenes that led to them becoming so fixated on a guy with no coaching experience whatsoever, to all of a sudden having this curveball with Dan Hurley that, while there were definitely questions about, how he would make that transition from college to the NBA, where he's never coached, his family has never, storied coaching family, never coached. Some of the details coming out didn't necessarily lend more details about process, but at least provided maybe an insight into why they were going to make this full court press with Dan Hurley. Now that the dust is settled and Hurley is no longer an option, it takes you back to those process questions, and more of them to ask, none of them that make you feel good about asking.
Well, and we'll look, we're going to spend the rest of the week going through all this. And one of the things I want to know from a process standpoint, do they have were they running a plan B here? Like, is there someone, in the office whose job it is to, keep going and exist in a world where Dan Hurley says no, so that he said no, okay, move on to, like, how are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? And you hit the ground running as best as you can on that. But I want to start with the money, because this, to me, I think, has been the biggest aspect of the news and the biggest point of debate, because I've seen different comments. I'm looking at, the YouTube page from this afternoon after we put the emergency pod up. And Darth Dan 3983 says, you guys are just haters. The man was never going to leave UConn, period. But the Lakers mindset is still there. Just because he said no doesn't mean they're dumb now. First of all, Dan, thank you for watching, Darth Dan. But if they knew, if the man was never going to leave UConn, period, then the Lakers shouldn't have ever gone through this. They should have known that he was never going to leave, that there was no offer that would have gotten him to leave UConn. I think there was. I don't think this was bad faith on the part of Dan Hurley. I think ultimately he wasn't maybe ready to make the jump. He didn't love the Lakers offer. Maybe the finances weren't enough to put him over the edge. There could have been some other things going on there, but the money first and foremost, the size of the offer. If you are going to go in on this path where you're going to try to convince Dan Hurley to leave UConn, pass up a chance to win a third straight national title, move his family to the West Coast when they are East Coast people, all of these things. First and foremost, you have to put him in a position where, like, at the very least, they says, well, God dang, man, the money here, like, it's hard to pass up. And that's important for two reasons. The first one being it shows him the resources, the commitment, and all that other stuff. And then obviously, Andy, it gives him that sort of, if it's a tie, $100 million, like that's the number. $100 million contract was what everybody was expecting because that was the reporting, and there was no pushback against that necessarily.
Yeah, I'm reading from Jeff Goodman, longtime college basketball writer he'd been with ESPN for years. He's as well sourced in that world as anybody. From Twitter, quote, Hurley strongly considered the Lakers, but after meeting with the Lakers brass on Friday night, he ultimately decided this wasn't the right move for him in his career. According to my sources, he flipped his decision. He may have flipped a couple times. He has wrestled with this decision since Wednesday. It was not an easy decision, and it wasn't a money decision. And want to make clear on a few levels. First of all, to Darth Dan, he was never going to leave UConn anyway. That's not the checkmate argument that you think it is, because if you really think
if the Lakers were being played
right,
that's bad for them.
Right, that it's bad for them, and that's not the sick burn against us that you're presenting it as. Like, you're actually making the Lakers look not just worse, you're actually making the Lakers look worse than we are presenting this.
Correct.
But here's the thing. Even if this wasn't about ultimately the money and his emotional connections to UConn were so strong, and the opportunity to three-peat, which has not happened since John Wooden coached UCLA, was too great of an opportunity ultimately for his heart to pass up on. And his wife is saying, I don't want to go to the West Coast. Like, all of these different things accumulated to make it so money would not have been a factor. That's fine. But there's another side to the money equation of this that is just as important as trying to convince Dan Hurley to leave UConn. I'll explain what that is coming up next. Locked On Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means NBA Finals, baseball, and the opportunity to bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So just pick the most obvious, simple, no-brainer bet. Put down $5 on it, you win, boom. That's $200 to bet on spreads and money lines, player props, all sorts of different fun options. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Real quick before getting into this question of money, want to let Laker fans know Darvin Ham no longer unemployed. He is joining the Milwaukee Bucks. He is going to be Doc Rivers' lead assistant. So nice gig for Darvin Ham. We both said we think he is going to get another shot at a head coaching gig. Who knows? Maybe, Doc Rivers does not seem like he wants to be in Milwaukee forever. So maybe he ultimately ends up taking over for Doc with the Bucks. He's been with that franchise for a long time. I believe he played for him as well as, having been an assistant. So either way, congrats to Darvin. Glad to see that work out for him. The other piece of the offer, beyond the money's ability to hopefully entice Dan Hurley to join the Lakers, even if ultimately there was no amount that was going to make this happen, for the sake of optics and for the sake of not looking like you are continuing the path of, say, 5 years ago when Ty Lue really wanted to be the coach of the Lakers and LeBron really wanted Ty Lue to coach him, and the Lakers refused to go beyond 3 years, which was the length at the time of LeBron's current deal. And you ultimately let that money get in the way of the guy that, quite frankly, should still be coaching this team or in extension or renewal talks of his own with the Lakers, or Frank Vogel's fake 1 year extension, which makes you look incredibly unserious. If you're the Lakers and all of a sudden you are in this high profile pursuit of a guy that is going to be very difficult to pry from a situation that he likes, you need to make sure that the offer looks serious. Like one of those, there really isn't enough money to make it happen. Try us. Like one of those type of things. And
what if I wrote this number down on a piece of paper? And people it's a frustrating, because I've seen people say, but but guys, he's never coached the NBA before. 6 and 70 is that's a pretty generous offer. It's like it is in a vacuum a competitive offer. But if you're going to go this route, remember, you've got JJ Redick over here being referred to as Pat Riley, who thinks he's sort of down this road. You've got James Borrego, you've got David Adelman, you've got all these other people. If you're going to go down this road where you put all of these people on hold to the point where it is,
and put yourself out on a limb, by the way, put it as an organization.
Unquestionably. And you and I disagree a little bit about, potentially what this means, but it is unquestionable. If you are if you're going down this route where you have the surprise thing, you are telling everybody that, you guys are not we cannot credibly claim that you are our first choice. And you will know that you are a second choice or maybe a third choice or whoever it is. And that happens in coaching searches, but this is a really public way to let everybody know. And so if you're going to go down this route, you can't play the game of, this is a pretty competitive offer here. You have to be, it's kind of crazy and unreasonable to pay a guy who's never been an NBA head coach like he's Eric Spoelstra or whatever. Then don't go down this road. If you're going to go down the road, it has to include an overpay in years and in money, or don't go.
I'm glad you say the idea of it being an overpay, the idea of, coming correct on the offer. Given everything that's gone on with the Lakers up to this point, with in particular coaching, it wasn't even about coming correct with the offer. It was about overcorrecting with your offer. Yes. If you're the Lakers, you would rather look too thirsty in this situation than unserious.
That's the risk. That is part of the risk. Is Dan Hurley is an unknown quantity, and it's a kind of a crazy amount of money. But if you think this is your guy, I had a debate about this with somebody because I put out the question, what would Steve Ballmer's offer been? And a lot of people pointed out, and they're correct. Well, what has that money gotten Ballmer? He paid Ty Lue. Ty Lue hasn't won him a title. There are a lot of reasons coaches win or don't win or don't win. and all that stuff. A coach is one piece of it. But the point isn't whether or not they've gotten better results. That's an argument for, your coach doesn't matter that much. Don't go after Dan Hurley. Don't give anybody that much money. The point is, if you identify a person as the asset that is going to give you the edge that you think you need from your coach, and it's the difference between a first round and a conference finals, a second round and a finals, or whatever that might be, and this is the guy who's going to give it to you, well, then you're not really overpaying. Like, you have to believe in what you're thinking, and you can't hedge. This is our guy, and the value comes from, we're paying a premium because we believe this guy will give us that last boost to where we need to go, or build a program, or whatever it is that they're looking for. He will do it at the level that we want. And so ultimately, while we are giving him a ton of money and there is risk, it's not foolish, because we believe that he is going to deliver the full vision of what we want.
No, I referred to this before, both in the emergency podcast, but also on Twitter. Like, 6 years, $70 million is a perfectly respectable offer, but they needed to make a Godfather offer. This was not a Godfather offer. And to take another line from The Godfather, when you're Rob Pelinka, a man in his position cannot afford to be made to look ridiculous. And going, I would say, 75% in, and obviously I recognize there are limits, so this includes Jeannie Buss looking ridiculous with Rob Pelinka, but 6 years, $70 million to me is 75% in. And for something like this, if you're going to bother to do it at all, you needed to be all in. And with Rob Pelinka, I would like to think that he is feeling some heat right now, because there is no way that he was not, commandeering the SS Hurley. Like, especially when you take into account how secretive this thing was, how people even inside the organization were surprised by this. Like, Kurt Rambis did not throw this out in front of Jeannie as an 11th hour offer. This was something that Rob Pelinka ultimately had to have put in front of Jeannie, and had to have sold her on the idea of, this is both great for the organization if we get him, and this is possible. The way this played out publicly made the Lakers look bad in the overarching context of, can't these guys just hire an effing coach and have it work out? And you have to figure this was something that Rob Pelinka sold Jeannie Buss on, and now it ended up boomeranging back. And if there isn't heat on Rob Pelinka now, then I question whether or not there'll ever be heat.
Yeah, I mean, but like, there's just so much. There's a lot left to learn about this. Like, you read the Jeff Goodman report. It wasn't a money decision. It is going to be difficult for me to really diagnose where things are with stuff like that, because I suspect that, Hurley is a classy enough guy and respectful enough to the Lakers, who I'm sure made a very good pitch, and, and all that stuff. He is not going to, at least not in the immediate aftermath, it is not going to be a story where Hurley was like, I was ready to go, but they weren't ready to move on the money. Like, that's not going to be the first iteration of this story. It's just not. I wonder, again, like, when they put this out there, like, did they think there was was it a 50-50 thing that they thought it was? Did they think once they got to this point that it was sort of 60-40, 75-25? Like, what was the reach that they felt like they were taking, where they were like, where they went into it with like, do we have a 20% chance of getting Dan Hurley? Because that's probably too low. Yeah. I appreciate the big swing, but like, that's too high of an odds of prying the guy out of there. Now you got to finish the rest of your coaching search. But if they thought they had legitimately thought they had an 80% chance, like, okay, why did you land on the 20? Were you just a little wrong? But you just couldn't quite convince them? The wild card? I don't know. And it doesn't mean they necessarily, but the only part that I can think of that I really think they got wrong was the optics of this offer. And because the other stuff we don't know about, what we do know is the number. And I think from a strategic standpoint, the optics around the league for the other guys who are, now up for this job or whatever it might be, it reinforces too many negative things about the Lakers that ultimately they don't have the money. If you're somebody who's like, you know what, I'm fine with a $4 million staff or $4 million for me, but like, are you really going to pay my staff? I'm fine with this salary, but like, I would love to work in a place where they have a bigger analytics department and a front office. Are you going to put out like that might cost an extra $4 or $5 million a year, 3, 4, or 5 million to build, whatever it might be. It reinforces the notion that the Lakers aren't equipped to provide the type of architecture around the coach and around the roster to compete with the most elite teams and the most elite owners. Like all of this gets reinforced when you come in with a number that is, while reasonable on an intellectual level, too low for the thing you're trying to accomplish.
Sure, quite possibly. And then just raises the question, what's next? Who's next? What the hell, man? Answer that coming up next. Locked on Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get things off our chest, big or small. Certain issues can really start to get to you, and it's important to find someone that's unbiased in your life that helps you let it out, or an outlet. Like we, as an example, do this show, Locked on Lakers, that we hope can be a nice stress release from real life. Maybe not this particular day, but most days, we hope that it can be something that distracts you from your real life. But I don't care how much purple and gold you bleed, there are always more pressing issues in every Laker fan's life. And again, it is important to have an outlet for those issues. And I can speak to how much talking with a professional in therapy helped me and my family during a really difficult period. And therapy can be a very different, very rewarding experience for everybody. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
You feel very strongly that this could be damaging for the Lakers, whether they're turning to JJ Redick next, back to Redick, try to revive that, whether they look at James Borrego, whether they maybe kick the tires a little harder on Micah Nori or David Adelman. But the potential fallout from this could really hurt them.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I was reading some of the coverage of this, and there was a line that jumped out at me from Brian Windhorst, ESPN piece that he wrote about this. And quote, "Going for Hurley was a stunner and aggressive, but it also told a deeper story. The Lakers weren't in love with the other available options." And I think going this strongly, seemingly publicly, if nothing else, at the 11th hour, for a guy that was going to be very, very difficult to pry away, even if the Lakers put their two best feet forward in the most maximized way possible. This was going to be difficult because Dan Hurley does not have any pressing reasons to leave UConn whatsoever. If anything, he has more pressing reasons to stay. But the idea that you would pivot in that direction, or we now keep hearing, for example, Woj put out a report that JJ Redick has not even had what would be considered a formal interview yet with the Lakers, to which I was like, what have we been doing this whole time? You know what I mean? Like I feel like this can really send signals to JJ Redick that it's like, we've been talking up your potential more either to talk ourselves into it or more to talk the fans into it than we actually believe it ourselves, like truly believe it. If I'm JJ Redick, the idea of stepping into a situation where it's going to be your first time coaching, where he also, like Dan Hurley, does not have any pressing reason to go. He's got a great gig with ESPN that they don't want to lose him. He has multiple podcasts that he's extremely good at, one of which, the one that he co-hosts with LeBron, for a multitude of reasons, including it could be considered tampering, he'd probably have to stop doing. He has no immediate need to leave this job unless he really feels like the organization absolutely 100% believes in him. This thing is a sign that they don't believe in him as much as they had been leaking they believe in him before, that they're, that they don't quite see him as the Pat Riley that was being messaged before. And then if you don't hire JJ Redick, James Borrego, Micah Nori, David Adelman, Sam Cassell, I don't care how great their interviews are. I don't care how much they've learned at the feet of whatever great coaches. They're going to look like serious consolation prizes. They are going to look like participation trophies through no fault of their own. So, yeah, I do think this is problematic. Do I think it means the Lakers can't end up with a coach that works? No, because we saw this very similar scenario play out with Frank Vogel, and they won a championship in his first season. But this doesn't help. It doesn't help at all.
I agree. Yeah, it's hard to argue that. I think, excuse me.
I'll be honest, if I'm JJ Redick, I stay away from this. I do.
And that's the concern, is that, and if it doesn't happen, there'll be a lot, there'll be a lot of both camps trying to make it seem like they broke up with the other one. I can't dump you. You can't dump me because I'm dumping you first. And so that's going to be a thing. But what I think you are correct that it hurts them, and it could shrink the applicant pool. There's no question. It could make it so instead of Nori and Adelman and Redick and Borrego, they might only have two of those guys, or three. Other guys might quietly be like, maybe I'll just wait for the next opportunity to come along. Because if you are an Adelman type, one of these guys who doesn't have the long track, really any of these people at this point, like, what makes you think necessarily you're going to get treated differently than Darvin Ham did, or Frank Vogel did, or any of that stuff? Like,
you could get a perfectly
willing to do this big thing with Dan Hurley, but you weren't didn't look like you were willing to go all the way with it.
I was just about to say, you could also, let's just say the Lakers offered Micah Nori 4 and 28. Like, that would, under normal circumstances, feel like
a massive deal for a first-time head coach.
Yeah, that would, under normal circumstances, or let's just go 4 and 24. Or like, I believe Darvin was, I don't remember, he was getting somewhere between 5. I thought like,
was it 5 and 6? Something like
that. But let's just say Darvin money. Like I remember the general consensus at the time was the Lakers made Darvin a legit offer and gave him a legit contract. They could turn around and offer that to Nori, to Adelman, to Redick. If I'm Redick, I'm like, I'd like to see 6 and 70, please, since I'm apparently Pat Riley. Like, if I'm Redick, I am asking for a lot of security.
Well, this is the issue, but wasn't this the issue that you pointed out with, the problem with allowing the Pat Riley thing to leak is that, you put yourself in a position that once you call a candidate Pat Riley, you need to hire him, because if you don't, you're passing on Pat Riley, or you're lying. Like, the guy's not really Pat Riley. If Pat Riley's available, you hire Pat Riley.
Again, I think this has the potential to make however much longer this search lasts and whoever they end up landing on very potentially messy. And oh, by the way, there's 2.5 weeks till the draft. You need to get going on this. Like, you need to actually be figuring out who your staff is going to be for whoever this coach is. You have to start thinking about, we might have to keep 17. Like, who are we going to take? Like, there's all sorts of stuff going on with this. I'm sure LeBron and AD have thoughts. Like, this is messy, man. It's
very messy. You noted, we'll get into this tomorrow. Here, like, things I want to talk about for tomorrow. Like, I know a lot of people like JJ Redick, because JJ Redick had met reportedly once with the team, but not had his quote unquote formal interview with the Lakers. So, the first batch of interviews is the get to know you, just, guys talking. The second one is and only Borrego has gone through that process, the second interview. Where do they, when we talk for tomorrow, where do they go with JJ Redick? Is that we'll keep a really close eye on what that looks like going forward. I certainly could be wrong about how easy it would be to, relative ease, which they could go back to that. Moving quickly versus being deliberate, because the next offer, in my opinion, you make better land a head coach. There's a lot still to cover. Another 24 hours or so of reporting will, I think, bring some things to life. Go ahead.
I was going to say also, I want to offer in Wednesday's show an optimistic thought. After all of this, something that I was thinking about, that there still may be some optimism moving forward with whoever the coach ends up being, if one thing we learn from all of this reporting remains the same. So talk about that on Wednesday as well.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where we're going to hang out with over 24,000 subscribers to the channel. Leave us questions, leave us comments. They are the spark of a lot of what we talk about on this show, and especially at a moment like this. We'll see everyone tomorrow.